Hello and welcome to the Football New South Wales Community Podcast, covering the great people, organisations and initiatives from around the football family. I'm your host, Teo Pellizzeri, and has been feature in our podcast series so far. We love to talk to the associations, and today our guest and co-host of this episode is the CEO of Central Coast Football, Alex Burgin. Alex, great to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
So how long have you been in this role at Central Coast Football as the CEO?
So I'm back in my second stint with Central Coast Football. I've been the CEO for 18 months, but I worked as the competitions manager way back in 2012 at Central Coast Football, and in between went down to Melbourne, had some state and national roles with the AFL, and then I'll come back to the round ball game back at Plume Park.
So an association that you know quite well at a number of levels. How many staff in the building? How many sort of people in the orbit of your organisation at the moment?
Yeah, we've got 9 staff that work at Central Coast Football between full-time and part-time. We've got a heap of casual staff that run our hospitality and our canteen at Plume Park as well. We're fortunate to run our own venue and manage our own venue there at Plume Park with 3 fields and our offices and our hospitality there as well. We've got 14,500 players. We've got 1,200 coaches. We've got 250 referees and a couple of thousand volunteers that make the game tick day to day for us on the coast.
So I was going to ask you for some of those key numbers because the Central Coast means very different things to people who live there as opposed to people who just talk about it in abstraction. So what actually is your catchment area? Give us sort of the territory and the region that those 14,000 players are drawn from.
Yeah, so we're everything north of the Mooney, pretty much. So our most southern club is Yamina on the peninsula, and we've got a few clubs on the peninsula, and we go all the way up to Gwandalin in the north, which is the boundary between Football New South Wales and northern New South Wales football. So before you get into the Newcastle NPL competitions, we reach all the way up to Newcastle, basically.
And in terms of expansion, is the association going to expand west? Is it growth from within? Is it consolidation of what you've got? What would you say the growth profile is of your region at the moment, given that there's a lot of exploitable land, I imagine?
Mm-hmm. Land is at a premium. We have a lot of regional development happening at the north end of the coast. So our Wangara, Wadalba, that kind of region on the Central Coast, there's lots of housing development up there. We need more fields and green space to follow with that housing development because it hasn't been forthcoming, but our next club will come from that north end of the coast. We're at saturation point. We call it the golden triangle of Kincumber, Avoca, Terrigal. There are three of our 4 biggest clubs, and they've only got sort of 2.5-3 fields between them. So there's a lot of saturation of players in the east sort of section of our game. We need to find more space to play in.
This comes up a lot with the associations we talk to, whether they're landlocked or whether they're on the outer fringes of the Sydney suburbs. Or in your case, would you say semi-regional association? How do you define yourselves as how you look at your association, given that you are sort of at the top end of Football New South Wales and just below that northern New South Wales border?
Yeah, coasties like to think that we run our own game up at the coast. I think we like to think we're a little bit special. As soon as you cross that bridge, there's something different in the water up on the coast. So, sometimes it benefits us to be a regional or rural area, and we take that where we can. But in reality, most of our participants, if they don't live and work on the coast, they live on the coast and work in the city. So, we're not that far away. Only took me 45 to get down to Valentine today to record this with you guys, so it's not that far away.
So before we get into some of the programs that your association is running, the halo effect has been particularly shiny for your region in the last 6 months. The Central Coast Mariners won the A-League men's. They returned to the A-League women's, and like the rest of the country, you had the Women's World Cup. So as far as what's coming in at the top of the funnel, demand for the game, interest in the game, are you feeling it? Are you noticing it at your association level?
Absolutely. We run summer football at Plume Park at our complex, and this year we've sold out. Like many other associations, we're full. We've got over 1,000 players playing summer football on our 3 synthetic pitches at Plume Park. The want to participate in our code has never been greater. Mariners being successful, W League coming in, Women's World Cup, Men's World Cup, it's all, it's a perfect storm of people wanting to participate in our code, which is great.
These are things that we will touch on as part of the chat today. But let's get into some of those programs because CoastKick MiniRoos is something in particular that your association is quite proud of that you are running. Tell us what it entails. Give us the information about the CoastKick MiniRoos pack.
Yeah, so next year we're going to have over 2,500 footballers receive a CoastKick MiniRoos pack. So it's an idea that I've brought with me back from the AFL. So they run an AusKick pack. So it's a similar type of idea, and we're blatantly ripping it off to provide some value to our members. So the idea is all under 5, 6 and 7s, they'll receive a ball, shin pads, water bottle and a bag to carry it in. It'll have their club logo on it. It'll have our partners' logos on it. It'll have the CCF logo on it, and a space to write their name on it so everyone knows which bag is which. It's in partnership with our great friends at Wang Lee's group who have come to the party to help out with the cost associated with that. We're trying to deliver value back to our players, basically.
It's a great point, because often that cost of playing argument is something that media use to wax soccer with, and they always hold up Aussie rules, and in particular AusKick, as the gold standard, because they give you everything, and obviously the game can afford to get their grassroots players in and provide them with as much as possible. So in terms of balancing the books and also assessing the cost-benefit analysis of doing this, how tricky was it, and then how easy was it for you to communicate the value of making sure that players at that entry-level age, have something they can call their own, that the association's given them, rather than having to self-fund it immediately the moment they walk through the door and start playing?
As we know, with the changes to active kids vouchers again next year, football and sport in general is only going to become more expensive for people, at all age groups, but particularly that entry level. So for us on the coast, we want to reduce the barrier to entry. If mum and dad don't have to go out and buy, $60 or $70 worth of balls and shin pads and bags and other things that you'd need to participate in our sport, and we can provide that through our great partnerships, then that's just a common sense approach for us. Everything we do is trying to deliver value back to our players. So this is an easy way to give back to them, hopefully garner some new young kiddies that want to come and participate, and mum and dad can see that, they won't have many more costs than their registration costs just to get in and start playing the sport.
How many players do you think this will impact in 2024?
So we had 2,400 players this year that would fit in that age group. We're expecting that to bump up at least a couple of hundred. So we're budgeting on 2,600 or 2,700 players next year to receive a CoastKick pack.
Blue sky thinking, if you had the clubs and they had the space to accommodate the demand, what do you think that number could be? If you were in front of the ministers lobbying for more field space, what number would you actually use if your clubs, if you had the necessary volunteers and pitches to actually go and accommodate the demand?
Assuming, our volunteers and everything else was, up to scratch, we could easily double that number, I feel. Green space, volunteers are the two big restrictions, obviously. We're not dissimilar to other associations in that regard. But we could easily, be up to 5,000 plus in that age group. Central Coast is a growing area, lots of families commuting from Sydney and moving to the coast. So our growth numbers, we're looking at 3,000 to 5,000 players over the next 10 years growth regardless. So plenty of opportunity. Now,
you mentioned the bottles and bags had space for the partners of Central Coast Football. How important is that commerciality? What are you finding with regards to local businesses, but also football-aligned businesses wanting to support the association at grassroots level?
Yeah, we have a great suite of partners that help us deliver football on the Central Coast, and all of our partnerships have either something to do with on-field or off-field activities that our participants are involved in. So, Wang League's our major partner. They're a great community organisation. They've got 11 venues, 8 of which are on the coast, and they've been a great resource for us coming on last year to be able to deliver things like this CoastKick pack, to be able to deliver things like our North v South All-Star games and a few other bits and pieces. All of our partners have something to do with football though. So we've got Summit Sport that have come on that provide all our balls, kit, accessories and anything that's on-field training. They're involved with more than half of our clubs as well as equipment suppliers, so they're great value as well. And we've got our local brewery, Hawkesbury Brewery, as well. They are the official supplier to the bar at Plume Park, which is a very popular place come finals time. Everyone gets up to the bar on the hill and has a Hawkesbury as well. So to have local support and to have partnerships that can deliver value straight back to the punter is really critical to our success.
And how much of that is, you mentioned football sort of aligned, but how important is the culture of your clubs, the environment they're creating, the experience of both playing, being a parent, being a referee? what's the heat check on the things you've put in place to make sure that, a partner knows that they're protected, that they're not going to appear in local papers or local news for referee abuse or any of the other things that competitive sport can kind of throw up. So how important is that management of culture and environment to make sure that you're giving your partners the best possible opportunity to have them up in lights for the right reason?
Yeah, there's a benefit to being involved with the biggest participation sport on the Central Coast, but certainly in Australia. Storytelling, I think, is always the key aspect, and that's what I always talk to potential partners or our current partners is we've got an unrivaled ability to create good stories and goodwill around football, whether it be, little under fives that couldn't otherwise play football, but they can now because they got a CoastKick pack, or it's our over 35s that got a case of Hawkesbury beer at their grand final because they won the grand final, and they're all old boys that have come back for one last season and had a crack. There's opportunities to tell all different types of stories in our code, and that's the benefit for our partners too, right?
We've talked about a bit of cross-code intellectual property, but what about other associations, other football governing bodies? Like, who do you look to see what they're doing, but also who do you find is on the phone to you or looking at you, or who have you met maybe in the industry that says, oh yeah, we looked at what you're doing, we looked at your website, and maybe you didn't even know that they were trying to copy what you were doing on the Central Coast? Like, how do you find the sharing of IP amongst other football associations?
Yeah, I think it's great. We've got great collaboration, and I'm often on the phone to the other CEOs of our neighbouring associations to see what everyone's doing and how they're delivering value back to their participants as well. I've found that some of the smaller codes and smaller sports on the Central Coast often come to us for advice on, not only partnership stuff, but governance-related things, club operations, and some other bits and pieces. So we're happy to share all of that information. Obviously, with scale comes a good ability to, we've been there and done that in most of these aspects. So to be able to share that information with other sports we're happy to do so. We're happy to bring all sports together.
We will loop back around to some of the big picture thinking later on in the podcast. Stay with us, though. We're about to bring in our next guest on the Football New South Wales Community Podcast. We're going to talk about another very important initiative with our first guest coming up right after this break.
Day after day, Kappa rewrites the concept of sportswear. Kappa means teamwork, past, present, and future. Kappa never stops, 'cause winning starts within. 2 people, 1 brand. Kappa.
Welcome back to the Football New South Wales Community Podcast. We've got the CEO of Central Coast Football, Alex Burgin, still here, and we have our first guest for us today. It is Kirsten Smith from the Daughters and Dads Football Program. Kirsten, hello.
Hi, how you going?
Good, thank you. Now, I would love to, firstly, before we get into the program, hear a bit more about you. How long have you been with Football New South Wales?
I've been with Football New South Wales for just over 12 months now, so with the Legacy Football Program. And yeah, I'm based at Northern at Spears Point, but I get to work across both member federations to bring this amazing football program to the community.
So you mentioned just over 12 months. Is this your first job in football, sports administration? Give us a bit of your background and your history in sport, where you've come from.
So I'm actually a cricketer. I worked at Cricket New South Wales for a number of years in casual and as a participation officer. And then I got an opportunity to work at the Newcastle Jets in the football administration operations side. And they're aligned with Northern New South Wales football. And then I was introduced to Pete Haynes and, was offered this position there.
Interesting, just very brief tangent, because all through sort of the early to mid-2010s, football was holding up cricket as the gold standard of women's sport in this country. So given your hands-on involvement in both sports, have you noticed the gap sort of closing? The cricketers still do amazing things. They get great TV numbers. But to see the Matildas have a little taste of that at the World Cup and then the Olympic qualifiers, that they continue to get huge audiences and kind of build their profile, how satisfying is it to see the two sports you're involved in now, probably sort of neck and neck, 1-2 as maybe the groundbreaking and market-leading sports for women and girls in the country?
It's incredible. I was actually at the 2020 World Cup for the women's cricket, and I worked at the Jets and I saw the crowds, and unfortunately they probably weren't there at the time. And then to see the FIFA Women's World Cup on home soil and the crowds we had, it was just amazing. And off the back of that, already having record numbers at A-League women's games, I think it's, football brings a lot to participants and their families, and it's great to see the recognition, particularly in the women's game.
So let's drill down into daughters and dads. Whose team, you mentioned that you're based out of the northern New South Wales. Whose team are you in, and sort of what sort of staff do you orbit with within the Football New South Wales infrastructure for this particular program?
Yep, so my manager is Helen Armson and Hayley Todd. So in the legacy team there, and at Northern we've got Annalise Rosnell. So Annalise and Helen, they're both the head of the legacy programs. And I'm lucky enough that I can work across both member federations to bring this program to the community.
So before we get into the program, Alex, when you hear the word legacy, particularly when it pertains to the World Cup, is it a word you use a lot in your association, or is it a word you hear a lot? And what does it actually mean to you as far as what you can practically apply to the game?
I think everyone's talking legacy over the last 2 years now, right? And it's forefront of all of our conversations, all of our club meetings, all of the conversations that I'm having with clubs at the moment is around how we can leverage this legacy funding, because events like this, whilst we might have some on the horizon, they don't come around very often, and we've got to have two hands out ready to catch, basically, is what I keep telling my clubs, because if we're not ready and we're not advocating for our game now, there's no better time.
So tell us where Daughters and Dads fits into this. For those who've never heard of it before, what is Daughters and Dads football? Tell us what it's all about.
So the program came about with alarming statistics around girls in sport and physical activity. So Professor Philip Morgan researched from the University of Newcastle that 90% of girls aren't meeting physical activity guidelines and haven't mastered fundamental movement skills by the time they finish primary school. And the beauty of Daughters and Dads football is that you can be new to football, you can have played for a number of years, but we're trying to create that safer, supportive introduction to the sport. You've got your dad with you the whole time, and a dad in Daughters and Dads football is a significant male role model. So it can be any father figure, a stepfather, grandfather, uncle, trusted family friend. And I think that's the beauty of this program, is that you really can just learn about football and do it in a safe space.
Club culture and environment is a big thing that I have spoken to every guest on this podcast about. This seems to be one of those programs that is a hands-on culture changer as far as shifting the mindsets, particularly of the dads and the clubs that the dads might play at or coach at or just be participants at. What are some of the things that you're noticing having administered this program over its journey so far?
Yeah, I think that we get to tap into the gender bias that exists and the challenges that girls face in society and in sport. And I think when the clubs are on board with the messaging and to see the impact that it's having on families within their community, once they've had a program, they just want to keep having more. It's just, it's a really rewarding program.
Do you have numbers on how many actual players this is currently being implemented with at the moment? Like, what's your actual data catchment of people?
Yeah, so at the moment we have 120 participants in Term 4, but since we've had the pilot program in Term 4 2022, we've had over 1,000 participants, and 40% of them have actually been new to football, and in this term alone, 50%. And I think that just off the back of the FIFA Women's World Cup, you can really see the excitement of girls who are already in football and still wanting to play, but also girls that are thinking, hey, Dad, I want to try football.
So you can go back over things you might have already mentioned to emphasise the point here, if I'm asking over old ground. What is groundbreaking about this program, especially given your background both as an elite sports person yourself, but also having been part of the sports administration apparatus? What's the groundbreaking things here that weren't being done before this program came in?
So this program isn't just your typical football program. It's so unique. It's addressing, as I said, the gender biases and the structure of the program. So the first session is a dads-only workshop where we're addressing the powerful influence that dads have on their daughters' lives, the challenges that daughters face, but also evidence-based coaching tips to keep their daughters engaged in sport. And the reason this is so important is because less than a third of fathers believe they have a unique and independent influence on their daughters' lives. And then so following that dads-only session, we have 8 weekly sessions with daughters and dads. And I guess the main part of the program as well is we have empowerment sessions each week. And that's where we're focusing on social emotional wellbeing aspects. So persistence, resilience, bravery, critical thinking skills. And this is so important to live full and active lives. And we hope that when the daughters are equipped with this knowledge and these tools, that they won't be a statistic and drop out of sport. Like 81% of girls are dropping out of sport by the age of 14 and never returning.
I want to ask you then, what were the challenges that you and your teammates at that age faced? Did you notice that a lot of your friends and teammates were falling out of sport, or was the incentive and the carrot of being, maybe a state level player with aspirations of playing for your country enough to keep you personally hooked, where maybe a social participant who's got school, who's got maybe a part-time job, other priorities in life, might have otherwise walked away from any competitive sport, not just football?
Oh, absolutely. I actually grew up in a small country town, Scone, and my dad and my brother, that's how I got into cricket and why I still play sport. But I always used to think I was a bit strange going through school. I loved PE, couldn't wait to get out, to be active, because a lot of my friends didn't want to do that and I didn't understand why. But I think I was fortunate to be equipped with the tools and the knowledge to be like, sport is so good for you to keep playing. But I used to get comments all the time when I was playing, you just got out by a girl, or you throw like a girl. But I think because my dad and my brother played such a big played a big part in my life, that it didn't really bother me. But other people, that can really take a toll on your confidence. It's like, if I throw like a girl, am I not doing the right thing? Like, why can't I throw just like me? And I think that's why, in the program we speak about gender glasses, and that's the critical thinking of thinking, is that true or false? Is that fair or unfair? Because comments like that, you run like a girl, can be really, insulting when it shouldn't be, because we're just doing what we're doing, that's who we are. So I think that's why this program is just groundbreaking, to try and keep daughters and girls in sport. You
mentioned the scientific element of it and that inspiration for it with the professor, but what's the sort of the stated goal over 1 year, over 5 years? Have they actually projected how big they want this to grow, or is it really more taking the data of the original rollout and then making decisions based on that? I mean, what feedback are you providing to the program so that people go, remember, Kirsten, she used to work at Football New South Wales, now she's off working for government department XYZ. But then the program and the IP maybe doesn't necessarily leave with the people that are running it right now. How does it, to use the word legacy, how does it stay? How does it continue to be implemented? And what is key reporting to make sure that if the program's a success, it continues to run?
Yeah, I think sustainability is such a big part. And as Alex mentioned before, storytelling. This program has so many amazing stories to tell and share, because it might not, get the reach or recognition that it deserves, because it is so unique. And that's why, the facilitators play such an important role in ensuring that these programs keep going and they have quality. But also, I think having the associations on board, like in the Central Coast alone, we've already had 3 programs there. So to have that support from the associations that are backing the program, the community, that is how this program is going to have a long-lasting impact and continue.
Yeah, it's interesting that you touched there on the facilitators. We're fortunate to have had 2 or 3 programs at Plume Park now, and it's great to have it in a football setting as well, I think, which helps. The facilitators that have done it on the Central Coast, Jodie, she's an absolute superstar. How do you get the next generation of facilitators, and is there an option for people, if they want to get involved, to potentially facilitate this and help grow the program?
Yeah, absolutely. We're lucky with the accreditation process for facilitators. It's all online now. So it's an after hours, 4 hours, but it's such an investment, and I think a lot of facilitators actually realise that when they do the program. Like Gerard and Jodie from the Central Coast messaged me the other day about pinkification, because now they've learnt so much. They can just see it in their everyday life. So I think when you have these fantastic facilitators, they're actually the ones that are spreading the word through the community as well, which is so important. But everyone can get involved. It's all over our website to apply for a facilitator, and we hope that we can continue that growth of the quality facilitators.
Let's talk uptake then, because you've mentioned running the program with Central Coast Football, but how many of the associations, I assume you've made contact with all of them, but where is the program running? Where are you trying to expand to? What's your capacity to expand? Give us sort of your projections of where it's going, maybe by the end of this year and then maybe through the winter season in 2024.
Yeah, absolutely. So at the moment we have 5 programs in Football New South Wales. So we have one at the Central Coast, at Linfield, Glenwood, Strathfield and at Thirroul. And this afternoon I'm actually heading to Vale. So in the Highlands Association, we've got a come and try there with 25 families. But the goal of Daughters and Dads is that we would like to have a program at each association to provide to their members. I think there might be a lack of information at times and not understanding the true benefit of this program. I think it's so great that Alex is here because he's seen that firsthand. But we would absolutely love to have a program at each association, and that is the goal. We have funding until the end of in June 2024. So past that, we still want to be ensuring that we have facilitators accredited and trained in each association to continue the legacy that this program is having.
Question for both of you then, because when you're talking to local or state government or local councils about, the social benefits of playing sport and football as that vehicle, how much more value does something like this add, where you can not just say it's not just about running around on the weekend, it's not just about fitness, physical activity and so forth. You can actually point to the initiatives that are being taken to actually affect societal change here.
I think inherently we know, day-to-day running of the code, how much benefit, and we've seen it over the last few years when football wasn't around as much as it should have been through COVID, etc., the social benefit of football and the fabric of the community that you're involved with, whether it be your own team, your own club, your own committee structure that you're in and you're talking to every day. So programs like this really tap into that. I mean, some of the participants that we've seen on the Central Coast, I've seen, rusted-on footballers that I've known for 20 years that are involved in this program, and I've seen dads and daughters that have come in, almost off the street, that are interested in getting involved in the program, and football's just the mechanism in which they can do so, and both have enjoyed it equally, right? So to be able to have this, and the storytelling aspect keeps coming up, but to be able to have equal satisfaction from a participant that's been in football all their lives and a participant that is fresh to football is outstanding.
Are we at the cutting edge here? Are other sports doing this? Are other countries other than Australia doing this? What can you tell us to put it in a bit more of a broader context of all of sport?
Yeah, so football is the third sport-specific version of the program. So Daughters and Dads Active and Empowered was established in 2014, and they've had programs in the UK through Daughters and Dads, and also in South Africa and in Austria. So it is growing. But I think because it is unique, we just need that support, the funding, the storytelling, so other countries can really get on board with it. But for the sport-specific versions, it's aligned with the World Cup. So there's a cricket, basketball, and now football.
Not to put you on the spot, but when you talk about the storytelling, have you got any anecdotes or any first-hand experiences that you've seen that have stayed with you as sort of a really job-affirming moment of this is why I go to work, this is what is motivating me to come in and keep doing this program? Have you got anything that sticks in the memory as a particular highlight?
There are too many to tell. I've been fortunate to actually deliver some of the programs. I think one that really caught my eye, and as I mentioned when I played cricket and I used to get a lot of comments, we were talking about if someone said to you, you kick like a girl, what would you say? And a 6-year-old girl in the back of the classroom, she said, thank you, I know that I can kick really far. And I think we're really changing the perception of what girls think that they can do and know that they can do. And another one is we had an 11-year-old girl who hadn't done a lot of team sport, and her dad thought that she'd really missed the boat. And in the feedback survey, the dad said, my daughter never used to play in sport at school, particularly against the boys. She always had that fear. But since the program, she's literally coming back every afternoon saying, oh, Dad, I did football today. Oh, I did cricket today. So I think there's so many stories, and it makes me so passionate about this program because I really wish I had this program when I was growing up. I was very fortunate that my dad is still so involved and will travel from Scone to Sydney every Sunday to watch me play cricket. But not everyone has that. As I mentioned, less than a third of fathers really have that, the purpose and involvement for their daughters because they don't believe they have that unique influence.
So for any associations, any clubs that have heard this chat, have heard this conversation, have heard the case study of how it's going at Central Coast Football, what are the contact points through Football New South Wales that they need to keep in mind if they want to actually, they might have heard, hey, the clock's ticking on June next year, we want to get involved in this, we want to make sure we're part of it. So what steps do they need to take from here, having maybe heard about the program or heard this conversation today?
Yeah, absolutely. So if they just go onto the Football New South Wales website, there's a Daughters and Dads section, and there is a jot form that you can register your interest to host a program, but also to become a facilitator. My details are there. I am, as I said, so passionate about this program, really want every association to experience it. So please get in touch with me, because I'll do everything I can to ensure that we can have one at their association.
Kirsten Smith, stay with us for the final segment, but thank you for the rundown on Daughters and Dads.
Thank you so much.
You are listening to the Football New South Wales Community Podcast. We'll be back to wrap it up with a few more big picture talking points on the other side of this break. Welcome back to the Football New South Wales Community Podcast. My co-host for this episode is the CEO of Central Coast Football, Alex Burgin, and also from Daughters and Dads Football, Kirsten Smith. And we're just going to talk about a few big picture talking points to bring this home, because Alex, after the establishment of Daughters and Dads with Central Coast Football, you do have a new women's football strategy. Tell us about its establishment and tell us about what's being implemented and some of its objectives.
Yeah, so a lot like other associations and leveraging the goodwill of women's football at the moment and the Women's World Cup and the Legacy Fund, we on the Central Coast have gone through a bit of a review of our competition structures and everything to do with women's football. So over the last 12 months, we established a women's football steering committee made up of representatives from around the grounds, coaches, players, club administrators. We've got half a dozen that have been meeting with clubs. We've run a number of forums, we've run surveys and a few workshops with coaching and refereeing to establish sort of our future vision for women's football on the Central Coast. That's led to a significant report, 20-page report into where we want to be and how we want to get there, and a number of changes that we're going to implement for 2024 and beyond.
So tell us about some of the key recommendations then and what you and your team will be working to implement.
Some of the big ones are around the competition structure for our Women's Premier League competition. So we're going to be reintroducing our Women's Division 1 competition. In 2023, we only had 7 clubs out of our 24 participating in a Women's Premier competition. So the ability to bring that back to a single team structure, reintroduce the Women's Division 1 competition. We had a club meeting last night and it looks like those 7 clubs are going to jump up to 16 clubs that are going to be participating next year. So the ability for every girl to play within their own club at the highest level on the Central Coast is what we're aiming for. Have representation from all our clubs at the highest level will be a great step next year. And in conjunction with that, it's not just players that are involved in this women's football strategy. It's coaching and refereeing as well. So we're going to be implementing a junior development program specifically for girls. We're going to run 3 different sessions next year and hopefully get over 300 girls through extra training hosted at Plume Park by our coach education manager, Peter Preston. We're also implementing girls refereeing elite panel. So we have 28 female referees on the Central Coast, which is underrepresented in our refereeing ranks, so we're hoping to double those numbers next year. And throughout specialist training from our coach educator, for our referee educator, Danny Horsted, we're going to hopefully get some elite female referees through the panel as well.
Just on the coaching question, because Central Coast Mariners are now the only A-League women's team with a female head coach. There isn't a single Australian female head coach in the entire competition. So when we talk about coaching, it's not just a matter of getting coaches accredited. It's not just a matter of having them coaching at clubs. It's about actually demonstrating the pathway and what it might take to coach at that elite level. Are you feeling any sort of a pinch at grassroots level about we need more women in leadership and coaching positions, otherwise it won't ever be reflected at the top of the game?
Yeah, absolutely. It's an untapped market for us in coaching. We currently sit at about 15% of our coaches are female coaches. In the Premier League, that's even less. So we're looking to certainly up those numbers and have female coaches, both of the female game and of mixed and male game, represented to where they should be. We're looking to double our number of female coaches next year. So from 115, we're trying to get to 230 female coaches next year. We're going to run a few programs to try and boost that number, create a community around coaching, a female coach mentor program, and hopefully that Sean and Emily from the Mariners can be involved in that as representatives of the very top level on the Central Coast as well.
Kirsten, I know that you're working right now with like sort of hands-on generational change for a future generation, but whether this is within your remit of expertise or not, What has to change, do you think, so that we're not waiting 20 years for the girls that are doing Daughters and Dads now to grow up and become the female coaches of the future? What do you think, if you had maybe some blue sky thinking about what actually needs to change to see a greater level of representation of women in both club administrator but also particularly coaching leadership roles?
Yeah, I think it's breaking down those barriers as we've been saying. But I think just partnering females together and knowing that they can do it, that support. We have a lot of representation of females now in Football New South Wales. As Alex said, 15% of coaches, but hopefully that number continues to grow. I think you just need those pioneers in the sport to lead the way, and really if she can see it, she can be it.
One thing I wanted to circle back to was your Premier League increasing its number of participating teams. And I guess how much of that is literally participant-driven with players coming back to the sport or wanting to be retained in the sport, and how much of that is club-driven with their hands-on recruiting or retaining their younger age groups that have come through and stopping the turnover and attrition rate so that by the time they age out of age grade football, they're ready to play seniors?
Yeah, absolutely. Up until now, girls have had to change clubs if they wanted to continue that pathway. So from our under-18s competition, if they wanted to keep playing at the highest level, there wasn't that opportunity, with only 7 out of our 24 clubs having a team in that Premier League competition. So the ability for a local girl that's at Avoca or Carryong or whatever club that it may be to continue that pathway and still play at the highest level and be able to stay at their club. Obviously, the time and effort that our clubs put into retaining players throughout that junior journey shouldn't just be lost when they age out at that top level. So this structure will hopefully engage all our clubs and empower them to keep their players all the way through.
One last one for both of you then, and I have raised this question with other guests on the podcast, but from what I understand, this will be fresh to both of you, this question. I haven't told you the answers to the quiz before I give it. How important is it not just to have role models like Sam Kerr, not just Courtney Vine now, who's back in the A-League, but also when you think about what a club looks like, that first impression when you walk through the door? I always bring it back to some of the clubs that I would regularly commentate NPL for, particularly when I was in Melbourne, about would I ever expect to see a poster of Sam Kerr on the wall of this club when I walk through the door? How important is having those very identifiable role models and sort of figures in the game, as they can be the smallest gesture, but sometimes it can make a profound difference to perception of your organisation? How important is it to have individuals that you can actually pinpoint as this is, you can be who you can see?
I think it's the first touch point, and it's so important. They have that sense of belonging. They have something to aspire to, role models, as you said. Yeah, I think it's so important in the female space, particularly.
Given that your knowledge of other sports, both of you, I mean, the AFLW's been great for footy. Cricket has, as I said, been the market leader. Is football perhaps in the most enviable position that we have the biggest names now? We've got perhaps the most recognisable faces in order to sell the game with?
I think so. And even like Courtney Vine, for instance, I was literally watching her on the news the other day, and she's at a school and everyone is just around a pitch just watching her play with other teammates. And that's boys and girls, juniors at a primary school. Everyone knows their faces, and I think that they have such an amazing story to tell and hopefully create that legacy.
Yeah, and to talk about legacy and to bring it all the way back to storytelling as well. All of these females have started somewhere, and they started in junior footy. So our job is to, for the next 20 years, the next World Cup, Women's World Cup that's hosted in Australia, hopefully we can now, through whether it be a Dads and Daughters program or a young girl that gets involved because a CoastKick pack is an option for them, maybe that's the next Matilda that can come all the way through.
I certainly hope that is the case, and thank you for tying it up very nicely back to the initiatives you're running. Alex Burgin, Central Coast Football CEO, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Kirsten Smith, keep up the great work with Dads and Daughters Football, and all the best in the run to the Christmas break and into the new year.
Thank you so much for having me.
And we'll be back with the Football New South Wales Community Podcast in 1 month. However, in the meantime, you can catch up on earlier episodes and also the Kickoff Competitions podcast for Football New South Wales. I've been your host, Teo Pellizzeri. Big thanks to our guests. We'll speak to you next time.